Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome to another edition of the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A. My name is Jeremy Betts, hosting, as always, this Sunday evening podcast where we answer your questions about the Pittsburgh Steelers and the NFL, how the Steelers fit into it, all in the big picture of the 2023 season and beyond. History as well. We'll answer it all here on the Steelers Q&A. Tonight I am joined by Mr. State of the Steelers himself, Daniel J. Daniel, how are you doing, man? Thanks for joining the show.
I'm doing great, man. Just kind of trying to stay cool out here. Like I was talking to you off air. It's been kind of warm out here in Texas, so been staying cool. And, no news is good news, so to speak, when it comes to Steelers stuff. So just kind of enjoying the weekend. How about yourself, man?
Yeah, man, I'm doing great. It's been a fun weekend. We've done a lot of work around here. We're still finishing up spring cleaning around this house of mine that is just a hole for a bunch of things I don't need anymore. So we're just trying to get through some stuff. So it's been busy, but it's been very rewarding to see that shed out back go from can't walk through it to actually having some defined spaces for everything. It's been very rewarding. Cleaning house a little bit, like the Steelers have done in many an offseason. And, hopefully I won't be needing to add a bunch of new pieces to fulfill my goals here over the next year, but the Steelers did. And what we're going to do tonight, Daniel, when we don't have specific questions from our audience, from our faithful listeners, and I see a lot of you are already here. Thank you for joining us again tonight. We're going to talk about some Steelers players that are kind of flying under the radar. We're talking a lot about the rookie class heading into year two, most of them. We're talking about, some of the established veterans like TJ Watt having a bounce back season, but we're not talking about some players that could have key roles on this team moving forward. Before we get into maybe some questions from the listeners, if you have somebody that comes to mind that we're just not talking about as Steelers Nation that we need to be, Daniel, I wanted to ask you, does anybody come to your mind right off the bat that kind of fits that description?
Under the radar guy that not many people are talking about, somebody that I think that's going to be a pivotal role, especially early on in the season, is probably Levi Wallace. I know
Absolutely.
a lot of folks are looking at, the addition of Corey Trice and Joey Porter Jr. and Patrick Peterson and, kind of overseeing what he was able to bring last season. Now, I know early on he didn't do so great. He was actually against Buffalo. I thought Josh Allen was picking on him just because he was no longer there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, but he ended up with, 4 interceptions on the year, 39 tackles. He only allowed 39 receptions, so he's tied for 53rd for that. So he ended up with some solid numbers. I think he's going to be a guy that works well with like a Minkah Fitzpatrick. These are guys that are cerebral type of defensive backs, and so I wouldn't count him out yet. And I think he's going to end up, showing up and having a role, especially early on in the season. And that'll be good for the rookie, cornerbacks. They'll give them a time to develop and grow into, who they're going to be as a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Absolutely. He was on my short list for sure as a guy just not speaking a lot to what he's going to provide this team. And so I 100% agree with you that he is going to have a role, especially early as the young Bucks develop. It's going to be fun to watch those guys develop, and we're going to want to see them on the field, especially Joey Porter Jr., the name recognition and everything there. But in the meantime, that veteran presence in the secondary, Patrick Peterson and yes, Levi Wallace, a veteran presence back there. He knows what it takes to work your way up to a starting role and to earn the respect of your teammates and the respect of your opposition. And I think he played really well down the stretch. He provides the Steelers a lot of versatility and could be a very good piece on the back end. Brian Brown brings up another player in the secondary, James Pierre. Nobody's talking about him, says Brian Brown. That is kind of true. I haven't been sitting here talking a lot about James Pierre. I think probably because, we view him more as a special teams player probably, and, a fill-in guy. But he's a guy that the Steelers have liked and have had high hopes for and hasn't really put it all together as far as being a projected starter to go into a season or, to really take the place of somebody. But this is a guy that Terrell Austin seems to like, that has the respect of the team. And what do you think? Do you envision any type of bigger role for James Pierre? Or is this kind of a guy that might, with a maybe not even a bad offseason, but just one that doesn't measure up to like the Corey Trices and the Joey Porters of the world? Is this guy on the roster bubble, Daniel?
Yeah, I think this guy's very much so like on the hot seat of being kicked out of the or being off of the 53. I think he might be a guy that could find himself on the practice squad. It's all gonna determine or depend on how these young cornerbacks do when it comes to being gunners, when it comes to the special teams aspect. James Pierre does bring that to his game.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of James Pierre has some of the intangibles, and it was expected of him that the Steelers thought that they got a steal in him a couple of years ago. They put him in the starting position. He ended up closing out a game that I was at against the Denver Broncos a couple of years back, where he got the interception there at the end of the game, and then he just got kind of picked on, and film came out, and the opposition was able to predict and you violate him basically.
Yeah.
And so does he get an opportunity to turn it around? Sure. And he's going to have that ample opportunity in preseason, but it's going to be an uphill climb, in my opinion, for him. I'm not sure if he's going to be a guy that's going to end up making the 53, but I definitely could see him continuing his career on the practice squad. If eligible, I'm not sure if he is or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And as day-to-day as the NFL is, with a league where injuries can just happen like that and take out significant players, a guy with his experience could become a valuable asset very quickly to a team that knows him well and has, like you said, entrusted him with big moments in the past. I think, when you're talking about the defense, there's actually a lot of players on that side of the ball that we're not really talking about, because the offense is getting a lot of the under the microscope look, because it was the weak link last year. So we've been talking a lot about the steps that these guys can take and get better. I like this observation here from Gavin. Says no one has talked about Jaylen Warren that much. He says especially not much. I mean, we've mentioned him as part of that combo with Najee Harris, but I mean, there was someone recently who compared Jaylen Warren to Austin Eckler in style and the way he plays. What can you say, Daniel, about Jaylen Warren? What you expect from him in year two, and as a part of this combo? Is he going to get more run this year, or have we seen kind of the ceiling of what he's going to get as far as volume? Can he make more of it?
Well, as far as the ceiling, I mean, he's going into his second year, so it should be more. I mean, there was a great clip of Coach Tomlin here recently talking about expectations of second-year players, and how that perhaps the tolerance being shortened, like the mental aspect of the game. So what I expect out of Jaylen Warren is those improved aspects of the game that the coach is expecting of him. I expect him to probably make, to me, he did a pretty good job last season in pass blocking and understanding, where the pressure is coming from. But I think in a recent interview, he had spoken about wanting to know more about what the defense is doing, and so that way he's better equipped to take on pass rush and when doing pass protect. So I think those aspects of his game are going to improve. I've seen a lot of clips of him in OTAs and in mini camp so far, and the guy looks jacked. He looks like he's coming in.
Absolutely.
He looks like he was working out with Kenny Pickett or something, and both of these guys were on the same treatment workout plan or something, because these guys came in looking bulked up. I'm excited. I think he's going to be able to take off a load for Najee Harris, and we're not going to need to, or the Steelers aren't going to need to, utilize him in the manner that they did early on in his career, and perhaps maybe even prolong his career. So I'm very excited about Jaylen Warren. I think he's going to be a guy that ends up getting somewhere around maybe 500-600 yards this season. Sure. On the ground, and so even more through the air.
Yeah, I agree. I think he can provide kind of like he did last year, a spark at times. If things are tough sledding for Najee Harris, his style of running is just a change of pace, and it worked very well in cooperation with what Najee Harris brought to the table. As you looked at the end of the year, especially, and saw them kind of gel together. Here's a question from George. Says, do they carry 4 tight ends? So this kind of a little bit of a departure from the topic that we had been discussing, but still a roster related question, and one that I think is very interesting because you've got 4 guys there now in Freiermuth and Washington, Zach Gentry, and Connor Hayward that they're going to be battling for their roles. And I especially see the Darnell Washington, Zach Gentry, I guess, battle, if you will. There's similar built players as far as the height and weight. They're bigger tight ends. I just think Darnell Washington is going to be able to do more for your team. I would be expecting more or less Zach Gentry to not be a part of this team once the final cut downs are made. Do you feel the same way, Daniel, or do you see them carrying 4 tight ends into the season?
Well, it's not so much I see them carrying 4 tight ends. I see them making a move with one of their tight ends by not bringing back a Derek Watt as far as the fullback goes, and Connor Hayward. I think they're going to utilize him as a that type of Swiss Army knife type of player, and that he's going to be moved around from tight end to maybe fullback, halfback, things of that nature, get the ball in his hands in creative ways. And so I think with that being said, I think that they do keep 3 traditional tight ends when it comes to these guys. So if you're looking at it from Connor Hayward being specifically a tight end only, then yeah, it's going to be 4 tight ends. But I think his role is going to be more than just the tight end, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with you. We had, let's see where it is here. Sherry Richards says, I think Hayward is more of an H-back, so I would not be surprised, kind of in response to that. Yeah, if you see him playing a different role than like a traditional tight end, which very well could be with his skill set, then you've got a situation where keeping 4 tight ends is definitely not out of the question, especially when you consider the physicality of the position and, a guy in Darnell Washington who does have an injury history coming into this year. Maybe they're more willing to keep that 4th player just to give themselves some extra depth there. You have to make a cut somewhere else at another position, though, maybe offensive line or wide receiver on offense if you're going to keep 4 tight ends under that designation. So that becomes interesting as far as which players will return. I had a comment here about the running backs that I wanted to pull up. Oh, I didn't mean to pull that up, but let's talk about it here. Hello, Pittsburgh Steelers Nation, the greatest fans in the NFL and the greatest franchise in the NFL. We agree, Jeremiah Yoder.
So
thank you for that.
Last year, how many tight ends did they keep?
It was 3, wasn't it? It was
3 plus Derek Watt.
Plus Derek Watt at fullback, yeah.
So if you utilize Connor Hayward, or you take out the Derek Watt aspect, then you're utilizing the same amount of players. So you're not really having to cut from another position. You're just not having a fullback on the team.
Yeah, that's a good point. A very good point. Let me ask you this, Daniel. Are you a fantasy football player?
Betting wise, yes.
Okay.
I haven't gotten into a league where I drafted a player or a team, and then I had to stick to that team. I am very interested in it. I just haven't been around to do so yet.
Yeah, I think the Steelers are a very intriguing team this year for fantasy purposes, and I wanted to bring this up with the Connor Hayward discussion because I think if you move him into an H-back kind of role, then he's going to take away a lot of receiving work from the backs. That's and the way the Steelers are designed this year, a lot of their players, wide receiver, even tight end and running back, they're going to kind of vulture each other's production a little bit because they're running a multiple player scheme. And so you've got 3 viable fantasy wide receivers in Pickens, and then Deontay Johnson and Allen Robinson potentially. And then you throw in Calvin Austin, that muddies the group up a little bit. And then at tight end, you've got Pat Freiermuth, who's now probably going to cede some red zone work to Darnell Washington, you'd think, with his size and skill set down there. And then, Jalen Warren and Najee Harris taking some of each other's production as well. And then you throw Connor Hayward in the backfield. That's going to be tough to kind of peg where these players will look at as far as fantasy purposes go. I play in probably 12, 13 leagues a year, Daniel. So I keep up with this stuff a lot. And it's kind of a headache when it comes to the Steelers right now. So
I was going to say, that's a lot of strategic moves there to think about when it comes to who's going to score a bunch of points or not.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a boomer bust weekly basis for most of these guys. Maybe the only guy who really benefits is Kenny Pickett because he's got all these weapons and guys at target. So that QB3 status in drafts maybe pays off a little bit quicker. Maybe it gets to a QB2 status for those of you in Superflex leagues. Talk to me after the show. Let's see here. I wanted to bring up a player that I don't think is getting talked about here. And that's DeMarvin Leal. I think that, you got a lot of the guys on the defensive line getting talked about. You've got Cam Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi, now Keanu Benton, the new rookie, the new face there on defensive line. And we don't really know how the Steelers are going to use Leal. They used him out at edge a lot last year. Defensive tackle some. They've got him. He's one of only 2 players on the team that's listed by the Steelers as defensive end. So they kind of really, that tells me they see him as kind of a flex player there that can jump out and stand up if he has to in certain packages, but can also play inside and like that 5 tech, maybe a 4-eye tech as well. But I think that, with the natural progression from year 1 to year 2 and the athletic traits that we saw out of him in his rookie season, he's a guy we should be talking about more, because I think if he really develops, that he could take this defensive line from what projects to be a pretty good group. If he develops and takes another step and a leap, you could consider this maybe an elite group by the end of the season if he really takes a step forward. Any thoughts from you, Daniel, on that?
So I really like Leal. He's actually from where I'm from, San Antonio, Texas. So,
okay, yeah.
So he's local here. The problem about Leal, in my opinion, is that he's one of those versatile guys. He can move in a couple of different positions. And, I know it was somebody, I think it may have been Ramon Foster, it may have been somebody else that was on the offensive line, once said that if, you want to extend your career, learn a bunch of positions. If you want to, make a lot of money, play just one. And, him being versatile and stuff like that, it's going to get him, playing time and things of that nature. But he's never going to be, if he's got to be one of those jack of all trade kind of players that's moving back and forth.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's ever going to be that guy that, is going to be an all pro type of player. But I think he's going to be a good starter. I think he's athletic. He's got a strong motor. I think the Steelers got him at a steal. I think it was the 3rd round. Yeah. And so, he was the year before projected to go into the 1st round. Right. And so, I'm excited to see where he's at. I think he's a lot better than Loudermilk. And so, I agree. But I do see him as depth and a guy that can give, a guy like Cam Hayward a breather here and there and also push out to the outside if need be.
Yeah. And I feel so much better now after the signing of Marcus Golden about the Steelers' depth on the edge, especially when you consider that Leal can move out there. Nick Herbig can play there. And you've still got Quincy Roche kind of sitting in the back, kind of as a player that, a lot of fans really liked a couple years ago when he was part of the Steelers organization before they had to make the tough choice to cut him. And he went to be fairly productive with the Giants for a couple games and works his way back to Pittsburgh. That depth looks a lot better when you kind of configure all of that. And it's going to be interesting to see how the Steelers play all of those guys. We were talking about red zone work, and Mr. Jimmy Dean 1 says, hey, he's letting us know he believes this. Hakeem Butler is going to be instrumental in the red zone too. Do you see this guy making the roster, Daniel, or and then having a role on the goal line, or are there too many dogs for that bone, as Mike Tomlin would like to say?
I mean, I think he's going to be battling it out with a Miles Boykin for a position on this team. You know, it's going to depend on his ability on special teams, because Boykin is a guy that can play. He's very good at special teams. He's good at getting down there. And he even came out, I think, in an interview earlier this year saying that he wants to show that he's more than just a special teamer. He wants to show that he is a receiver first and can catch the ball. And he's a big body receiver as well. Whoever wins that battle is going to make this team very good.
Yes.
But that receiving, room is pretty tight. How many receivers do you think go into the season, on the 53?
Yeah, let's start naming them. Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Allen Robinson, Calvin Austin III. You've got Miles Boykin. You've got Hakeem Butler there. You don't have Anthony Miller anymore, who was a guy I really had thoughts that he would make the roster. Right now, you've got Gunnar Olszewski there too. I mean, that's 8 guys right there. I don't think he makes the roster right now. I think Miles Boykin probably makes the roster over Hakeem Butler. I'd say the Steelers keep 6 wide receivers this year, but I could see if they feel like Connor Hayward can play H-back and then move out into the slot a lot, I could see them going 5 wide receivers. But you'd have to cut a guy like Miles Boykin, who provides you such impressive special teams work, and that would be very hard to do. I think if you're Pittsburgh, I think they kind of have to keep 6, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if they keep 6, I think he's definitely on there. I think Gunnar is good as gone as long as Calvin Austin can show that he can be dependable catching the ball on kickoffs and punting. I think that's the biggest aspect is first is securing the ball and then making plays. One of the biggest things when it came to Gunnar Olszewski last year was that he was supposed to be this all-pro special teams player, and he cost us a game there against New England because of his inability to protect the ball.
Right.
So Calvin Austin, he's going to be given that opportunity, in my opinion. If he can do it, then I think that, I think there is going to be 6. And I do think that there's a good possibility that Hakeem Butler does make the team. But man, talk about being able to put some big people, on the field, especially in the red zone.
A basketball team. That's what it is.
Yeah. And a mismatch, a nightmare, mismatch nightmare for most teams. I mean, I can't wait. I mean, I'm excited for this season. I think this team in general is under the radar, almost to the point of disrespect in some certain aspects as far as, where players are ranked or this team is ranked. And I think they're going to surprise a lot of teams, very much so.
I agree with you, especially when you look at the schedule and the number of teams that if you just look at the schedule right now, it's very exciting to me. I see 11, 12 wins as a potential for this team, and it doesn't take too much straining to see that when you consider what they did last year, the growth that's expected, and their schedule. And, the AFC North kind of caught a break getting the AFC South and the NFC West as their divisional or outside divisional opponents. And then the Steelers play a 3rd place AFC schedule. That's conducive to a rise up the rankings, if you ask me. So that is something we'll be keeping an eye on. We're going to take a quick break for those on the audio side. If you're here with us live, stay put. Don't go anywhere. We're not going to go away for long. We'll be back on the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A in just a second. We're back on the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A. It's Jeremy Betts. It's Daniel J., Mr. State of the Steelers himself. Daniel, we've been talking about under the radar players on the Steelers. Right before the break, you mentioned that the Steelers themselves are flying under the radar. I think that's a huge point to make, and I think a lot of Steelers fans are probably feeling that same thing, that their team's not getting talked about. The sexy pick in the AFC North right now isn't the Steelers, it's the Browns. It's the Cleveland Brownies. I mean, that just can't fly if you're a Steelers fan. And I just think that the Steelers flying under the radar though is exactly where we want to be. at this point. That we don't need a bunch of people talking about, as much as we want to hear it, as much as we want to turn on the national news, the NFL Network and ESPN, and hear them talking Pittsburgh Steelers football. I think the people who know, and I think that's the league. And we don't need to be worried about what the national media says. TJ Watt to me is getting disrespected left and right in edge rusher rankings because he was injured last year. And I get it. It's a what have you done for me lately league, but you'd think 2021 was 13 years ago, Daniel, the way they're talking about TJ Watt.
I thought that, for instance, PFF had him at 4.
Yeah.
Did you see where they had Alex Highsmith at?
32, right?
Yeah, 32.
Yeah.
14 and a half sacks, the quarterback hits that he had.
Yeah.
And they had him ranked at 32. I was like, all right, there's definitely some non-bias here or anti-biasness going against the Pittsburgh Steelers here.
Yeah.
It's insane. Like I said, across the board, even, there was some rankings out there with quarterbacks that had these quarterbacks that have never taken a snap ahead of Kenny Pickett.
Yeah.
Like it's
Anthony
insane.
Richardson is like above everybody, above Kenny Pickett in everybody's list, and he hasn't taken a snap. And yeah, it boggles the mind. But we know, Daniel, and we're gonna see it unfold on these guys here in several weeks from now, unfortunately. But season's coming; it's marching on. Let's get to some questions here. Sherry Richard says, "Would you keep Tanner Muse or Miles Killebrew?" Fantastic question, Daniel. Why don't you open us up on this one?
Oh man, that's a difficult one. I'm excited about the potential. That's the key thing. There is the potential for Tanner Muse and what he can bring in. But with Miles Killebrew, you know what you have in him and his ability and what he's been able to put on the field in special teams. He's had a couple of blocks in his career for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, if I had to make a choice, I'd probably lean towards Killebrew. What about yourself?
Yeah, I'd probably because of the experience in Pittsburgh, and if anybody's a special teams ace, it's him. Tanner Muse has played good, has played well there as well. But and I know the Steelers liked him coming out of, I believe it's Clemson, right? He played for the Clemson Tigers.
I think so.
I think he was a national champion too, if I remember correctly, with one of Trevor Lawrence's teams. But I think that pedigree will give the Steelers something. And as far as inside linebacker safety combo goes, they need all the help they can get, especially inside linebacker, which I could see Tanner Muse kind of filling more of a coverage linebacker role, because of he's not a big dude. He's not going to be busting up the plays in the backfield a lot as a run stuffer, but you've got a guy in Killebrew who can kind of do that role already. Plus, what you're getting on teams, and with the AFC being as tight as it's going to be, Daniel, any edge you can get is going to be fantastic for you. It's going to help your chances of getting into the dance, and special teams is going to be huge for that, in my opinion.
With the defense the way they're already stacked or placed, do you see Tanner Muse getting a lot of playing time on defense, outside of injury?
I don't. I mean, he would have to be like a very, very specifically defined role player, And I think you've got Keanu Neal, you've got guys that can kind of fill that role already, and so I think it's what all can you do for me is going to be the question the Steelers ask at some of these positions, and Miles Killebrew, if he can do it better, then Tanner Muse is going to find himself on his way out probably, and that's unfortunate for him and for his fans. And we just want to see the better player make the team. I'm sure that's for players like that. That's kind of what we're hoping for. But yeah, I wouldn't think he'd get an especially lot of playing time.
What about sticking with the safety group? What do you think about Trey Norwood and his chances of making the team this year?
I think that he's a valuable piece as a backup, and I've been higher on him than most probably. But Trey Norwood, Mike Tomlin's Swiss Army knife, from day one, he's kind of been the apple of the coaching eye, if you will. So
Yeah.
I'm going to say that he makes this team because you've got an older guy in Keanu Neal. You want to have some experience back there, somebody who knows the calls, somebody who knows the communication. If Minka Fitzpatrick goes down for any length of time, I think he's a valuable player for special teams as well. So I definitely think he makes the roster.
Yeah, I think he had a pick six on Pickett during OTAs or minicamp not too long ago.
Yeah, he did. He makes plays. I think he's been overlooked and overshadowed because Minka Fitzpatrick is just so good, and when he steps in there, you can see the difference. But I mean, there's only one Minka Fitzpatrick in the league,
Yeah.
So your backups are definitely going to be are going to be, you're going to see the difference there. So let's get an observation here from Russ. I think Nick Herbig is going to surprise us all, and that's an intriguing thought. He was higher on a lot of national draft experts boards than he was on mine, but I didn't really know that much about him, to be honest. And I think that people just say that his motor never stops. And
Right.
I mean, the comparisons to TJ Watt are a little out of league, I think. But I mean, as far as the motor goes, you can see it. They have a similar get off and go. And TJ Watt was on the Footballing with Ben Roethlisberger podcast most recently, and he said it's all about get off at the NFL level. So if Nick Herbig can translate that and get ahead of the game, I think he could surprise us all, and he could fill in. But what I see is like that versatility for him kind of playing in. Do you see by the end of the year, Daniel, give us your prediction here. Does he see more snaps at inside linebacker, off-ball linebacker, or does he see more as a rotational pass rusher?
Before training camp and OTA started, I would have told you probably see more snaps at inside linebacker. However, it seems like all indications are that they really want to see if he's going to work out on the edge.
Yeah.
I think he's a little bit on the smaller side to be an edge guy. I know a couple of people say, no, he's only like a couple inches shorter than TJ Watt. It don't really look. It looks a lot shorter than. It looks a lot smaller than that. I'm not sure what scale they're using or what, but it don't look right to me. That
Right.
doesn't look that close. But I think he's going to end up having more snaps on the outside. But the Steelers in the last couple of years have utilized their outside linebackers in the middle, and have had instances where they've had three outside linebackers on the field at the same time, and one of them, being in the middle. Sometimes they'll have two on one side. I really see that perhaps he'll have that type of role. Maybe not so much being the outside guy, but being that third outside linebacker that comes in for pressure related incidences or situations. And I think that might be the role that he carves out early. One thing that he's going to be able to do, and he's very young, is he's going to be able to get stronger and bigger per se. He may not be able to get taller or longer, but he will be able to put on more mass. And, I think he's going to be a project for the long term, but I do see him having some specific role on this team. I do want to also say thank you, Aquatic Life, for your comment earlier. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Sherry Richards makes a good observation here too. I don't know how you get Herbig in the weight room learning from TJ Watt. He's going to get it in the weight room with TJ and learn that work ethic, and he's going to get better. That's one of the things that you got to love about the Steelers team is that the guys in leadership roles are superstars, especially on defense. And they've been there, done that at a level that most players will never attain. And so when you get to walk into a building and see that and see what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, it's no wonder that the Steelers have a tradition on that side of the football of just being able to reload and have studs there almost all the time. And so I would say that that's a huge point to make. It's time to see if that can start to develop on the offensive side of the football as well. So let's kind of transition to the offense here. Daniel, you and I both mentioned a defensive player that's kind of flying under the radar to open up the show. Do you got anybody on offense that needs more pop heading into the training camp season.
I'm excited about Allen Robinson. He's a guy that has had some injury issues, but when he's been good and he's been in the right system, he's been proven. I think he's a guy that can be your Jericho Cotchery, wide receiver for Kenny Pickett.
I like that.
Dependable, your security blanket, the guy that, can get the 8 yards when you need 7, the fighter. And I really like what he's going to be able to bring to this team. And like I said, he's going to bring that other dynamic. When you have a guy like Deontay Johnson that can just get wide open, on every single play because of his route running, and you have a guy like George Pickens who's going to be able to take it over the top or, has that contested catch ability, those two guys are going to, demand a certain amount of attention, and that's going to leave some favorable matchups for Allen. And so I'm looking forward to what he's going to be able to do in those situations. Calvin Austin is another guy I think that could be a guy that, can take advantage of those things. It's just we haven't seen it yet. So, but Allen Robinson is definitely a guy that I'm excited to see what he can do.
Yeah, absolutely. The trade was, a lot of Steelers fans kind of just were like, okay. I don't see him doing much after his down couple years now. But when you look at it from a couple different angles, first of all, the leadership angle, the been there, done that angle, that's going to be fantastic for that room, which has a lot of young guys. I know Deontay Johnson's been there a while. But I've mentioned before, I don't think Deontay Johnson has the best way with words, especially in his interviews. Sometimes you get the feeling that he doesn't care as much, but I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I just don't know if he's the vocal, experienced leader that room needs. So Allen Robinson coming in, that could be huge. And what do older receivers typically keep with them longer than maybe the speed element or the breakaway element? It's that ability in scoring situations. It's that ability on third down, like you mentioned with Jericho Cotchery, just the ability to kind of be there in the right spot for your quarterback when he needs it most. I think Allen Robinson could have a huge role in the Juju Smith-Schuster type design that we saw in the late Roethlisberger years, where Juju just kind of found the goal line or the first down marker and just kind of sat there and found the open zone. And if the play wasn't there somewhere else, then that's where Roethlisberger would go. So you've got guys who can do a little bit of everything on this offense. That's what I'm excited for. We had some listeners mention Alfonso Graham at the beginning of the show as maybe a player flying under the radar. And that's to be expected, I think, a little bit for an undrafted free agent signing, that we haven't seen a lot of. But I don't know, Daniel, if you've dug into some of his tape at all, if you've seen how he plays, but he looks pretty exciting as a player. He's got a kind of a different gear to him than the other players in the Steelers running back room. Do you think he has a chance to make this roster and be somebody that gives the Steelers kind of some dynamism that they haven't had for a while?
I think there's a possibility. I think he's going to be in a battle with, Anthony McFarland for a spot,
Absolutely.
Whether it's on the 53 or the practice squad. I think they're going to want a guy that has that, next step, that ability to move, into that next gear and have that home run ability. Unfortunately with McFarland, he had a down year his rookie year, then he had an injury. And then last year, in my opinion, preseason wise, I thought he actually had probably the best preseason he's had.
Yeah.
I thought he played well as Jaylen Warren just outperformed him. In this situation here, the only downside to these guys is the special teams aspect. Are these guys tacklers? Are these guys going to be guys that are going to be able to get down there on punts and kickoff coverage? And I'm not sure. I've never seen Anthony McFarland on special teams outside of, catching some punts on practice.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? So
yeah.
I did see a picture of Alfonso getting lit up by Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
So
right.
I don't know. We'll see. He took a hit, he took a lick, kept on ticking. So maybe he's got some toughness there. But he's got that extra gear. I think he's going to be battling it out with Ant Mac, and we'll see. May the best man win. May the fastest person win.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a fun question here from Vinny Aguakun. I hope I said that right, Vinny. Thank you for your question, man. Do you guys think Kenny will be voted as a team captain this year? since they voted Mitch last year? That's a good question. I think it's going to happen because I just think that he's got that swag, and the offensive players knows he's ready to jump into that leadership role. I say the Steelers give it to him. What do you think?
Oh, 100%. I mean, Kenny Pickett's already bringing in, these players earlier, in the offseason to build chemistry before the draft. He had the team out there in Florida doing those things that you expect the starters to do, the stars and the captains of the team. He's got a office, I believe, that he shares in the, at headquarters. So I think that, yeah, definitely he's going to be there. And, he signed the biggest contract of his life yesterday. I'm not sure if you were aware. He got married.
Yes,
so congratulations
absolutely.
to Kenny Pickett and Miss Kenny Pickett.
Yeah. You know what's funny? I was down in Jacksonville for their preseason game this last year. We were actually down for vacation at Palm Beach, I think it was called, and there it was like an hour drive from Jacksonville. And I was like, wait a minute, Steelers playing in Jacksonville preseason. I got to go see Kenny Pickett play in some preseason action, and went down that way. And I actually saw his fiance there in the stadium. Didn't get a chance to say anything, but I recognized her off of Kenny's social media and everything. So I've actually seen both Kenny and Mrs. Kenny now, and that is that's fun. Congratulations to Kenny Pickett and his new wife. I'm sure they're enjoying themselves right now somewhere sunny, hopefully. You
Yeah, I
just
think
had
they
a
were
little
in
one,
New
right,
Jersey.
Daniel?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
She's be 7 weeks on Thursday. She's growing
That's
fast
awesome,
already.
man. Yeah. I saw the couple comments about that, and it reminded me. I've got a 2.5-year-old, and
Oh, nice.
she is every bit the light of our life and the demon of our life, if you will, as well. I don't know what else to call her. She's just amazing, and I'm sure you'll enjoy every moment with the little one. So life change is happening all around us here in Steeler Nation, both players and fans. That's a lot of fun. So let me pull something up here. Was a good comment that I thought. I can honestly say that in years past under Colbert, we had so many holes in the roster that it would take him multiple off seasons to fix them all. It looks like Khan solved every single issue in one. I still have some questions at inside linebacker, for instance. But it's hard to kind of pick that statement apart too much. What do you think, Daniel?
Well, it made it easier to do so when the biggest piece was solved last year under Colbert. Correct. With getting Kenny Pickett. Right. So
yes,
you can't,
Kevin, for that.
You can't, look at everything that Omar Khan has been able to do without looking at what Colbert was able to give him and allowed him to do with the moves that he made and the right ones. I mean, the last couple of years, although there have been a couple of question marks, going with, Pat Freiermuth over Humphreys, for instance, the center in the draft, things of that nature. I think that the Steelers have put themselves in position and got some pretty high-end picks. For instance, you got the first overall running back in Najee Harris out of his draft. You had the first overall quarterback and Kenny Pickett out of his draft. So you got the top end of what you wanted to in a couple of positions there. And that allowed it, Omar Khan to do what he was able to do. And also, there was moments in the last few years where Kevin Colbert could have restructured some guys or done some things and gone out there and got some other players. But I think that the Steelers were aware of where they were and the likeliness of, getting another Lombardi. And instead of, maybe pawning off the future for, a hope or a prayer for something that was unlikely, they decided not to. So they really gave Khan a lot of opportunity to put a team together. I love what he's done so far. I like his aggression. I like what he's been able to do. And here recently, he ended up Keanu Benton, signing Benton, and he has something that, financially has not happened in a 49th pick, which is guaranteed money in the third year.
Right.
I don't think that's something that happens under Kevin Colbert. You never heard of those type of things, especially for somebody who's not been proven yet. And so I like this aggression. We'll see if it pays off. There's, high risk, high reward.
Yeah.
Things of that nature. But, Yeah, so
Right.
far I like what Khan is doing. I like
Yeah.
his approach.
Yeah, I do too. And I think you mentioned high risk, high reward, and some of the big moves he's made have come with fairly low risk, which has been awesome too. You think the Allen Robinson trade, that was I mean, what did they give up for Allen Robinson? And I know you don't know what you're getting in him necessarily, other than veteran player who's played in the league for a while and put up good stats several years ago, but it's just not. He's just not you're not looking at the Steelers' moves and saying, "Oh man, Omar Khan's getting fleeced by these guys." If anything, it's the other way around. So you gotta give him props for that. And I do think now that he's calling the shots, as far as personnel and contractually, then you're going to see a little bit different business structure from the Steelers moving forward, especially for guys that they specifically value. Daniel, before we close out here, I wanted to kind of take us back to our conversation a little bit ago about the Steelers kind of being under the radar and where we see this team going. Because, there's been a lot of talk that it's still a rebuilding year. You're trying to get to where you want to be maybe for 2024. Are we underselling what the Steelers can do this year? Are we overselling what the Steelers can do this year? What do you think? Can they win a big game? Like, can they win a playoff game? Can they go to the AFC Championship? Do you think this roster is in a place where they can compete with the upper echelon of the AFC in 2023, or are we still a year or two away from that?
I think what the Pittsburgh Steelers were able to accomplish last season was a huge indication as to the idea of what the Pittsburgh Steelers would be able to do this year. And I think that was, them going the second half of the season, going 7-2 down the line.
Yeah.
I think that gave the confidence. Like I mentioned before, Kevin Colbert in the last few years, he had the opportunity to massage the cap and do things to perhaps get players in or whatever the case may have been. And he didn't. And I think that was because they didn't see the opportunity there of a window there to get a trophy. Well, if the Steelers are so aggressive this year, maybe it's because they do see that window open. And so I think that they're putting all their, they're trying to make a move, and that's the direction that they're wanting to go in. You look at what Kenny Pickett was able to do last season. He was, well, let's look back at Miami. He was in a position to win the game at the end of the game in two different times, and in both situations through interceptions. At the end of the season, he was in that same situation twice, once against the Raiders and once against the Ravens. And in both scenarios ended up putting the ball in the end zone. And so he was able to overcome and to progress and develop. And I think this year, with a full off season, with him being the starting guy, Matt Canada and him can work together the entire time to kind of figure out an offense that works for them. I really think that this team can be more than just a team that can make a wild card push. I think this team can actually win the division and actually make a push, for a title. There's going to be some things that are going to be dependent on if those were to happen. We have to first see, Matt Canada, is he going to be able to put, we got the players. Is he able to put the scheme on the field to make it work? That's going to be a huge question mark, and one that I think everybody's going to be looking at. But with all that put aside, I strongly suspect that this team can definitely win at least double-digit games and at least put a victory in the playoffs. And I think that would be a very successful season for this team.
Absolutely. I like to do my preseason predictions for everything, just to kind of see, just as an evaluator of the league. And I talk on podcasts, and I'm a fan more or less of everything, but not trying to call myself an expert, but I like to see, can I be objective in how I project things, how I predict things? Can I look at the list of NFL quarterbacks and project where Kenny Pickett's going to kind of fall heading into, or by the end of next year? Can I look at the teams and see who's going to make the playoffs and who's going to make a push and be objective and be, am I getting these correct? It just feels like that the Steelers have a shot here to shock everybody, even maybe us. You know what I mean? So, and I'm hopeful for that. A lot of it depends on your quarterback and how big of a leap he can take. Can he be a reason? We've seen it, that he can be a reason that the Steelers win close games. but can he take over games? That's going to be the question when things get tough, when the scheme's not enough to win. And I think a lot of times it will be, especially against some of the lesser teams in the NFL. The Steelers' run heavy approach should be enough to win games, and rely on the quarterback to not make mistakes and put you in position, and that defense to just shut people down. That's going to get you far enough. That raises your floor pretty high. Where the ceiling creeps up and gets really high is if Kenny Pickett, when your team is down 27-14 in the third quarter and it's a division rival or it's a playoff team, can you put the game on your shoulders and say, okay, we can't just pound the ball like we've been doing all game. It's not working. I've got to win this game for us. We saw that out of Roethlisberger for years and years. Can Kenny Pickett be that player? That's going to be what separates this team from high floor to high floor, high ceiling. And that's going to be really interesting to find out. Daniel, any final thoughts before we go?
Yeah. There's the other side, or the other part of that equation, which is the other teams in the division. The Bengals, they have a first team or first seeded record or schedule. I'm sorry. They lost a lot of players on defense. And so, we'll see how they do this year. The Ravens, the Steelers have Lamar Jackson's number. He doesn't scare the Pittsburgh Steelers whatsoever. And I don't really think that their additions in the receiving group are anything to be, worrisome. If this was like 4 years ago and, maybe OBJ could scare somebody then. But,
right.
Now not so much. And, when it comes to the ball with the Browns, last season, the Pittsburgh Steelers played the Browns in the last game of the season. Deshaun Watson had 6 games under his belt at that point. He looked pedestrian against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he looked very similar to the times that I've seen him play in Houston, against the Steelers. Didn't look much different. So when I look at this division, I really truly think that the Steelers have the ability to compete for numerous reasons, and not just because of their skill. And I'm excited about this year. I think everybody should be.
I love it. I totally 100% agree with you. Thanks for joining me today on the I always want to say Steelers Fix because that's my show, but it's the Steelers Q&A. Daniel, we'll have to do this again sometime. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you for joining in on the live chat, letting your voices be heard. This show doesn't work without you, and so we appreciate you. If you're listening to this on audio, you can get it wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to stay tuned to the Steel Curtain Network for all of your Pittsburgh Steelers news and notes as we march our way towards Latrobe and 2023 training camp. Daniel, have a good night. Everybody in the live chat, have a great night. It's been real. We'll see you next time.